Hello?
Hello, can everybody hear everybody?
I am here. Hello. Okay, thank you very much. How's the audio coming through there, Greg? I do have a 2-year-old running around upstairs who's getting near bedtime, so if you suddenly hear shrieking, it's all natural and part of the plan. Yeah, thank you for letting me come and present today. It's good to be here. Just wanted to give you a bit of an update on what Southgrow is working on for the region in regards to economic recovery, as we're all going through this insane, crazy time together. We're all in the same boat, that's for sure. I've had an interesting time myself adjusting to childcare while trying to work from home. It's been interesting. So you've got the presentation there in front of you, I see. The reason why Southgrow has partnered with Economic Development Lethbridge and the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce and about a half a dozen other organizations such as Community Futures in the region is really to get the biggest impact we could get on an issue that is bigger than all of us individually. So Southgrow represents about 70,000 people, 170,000 people with the city included, but our assets as they are scattered throughout all of the communities. And I'm the only full-time staff who sits in a desk every day working on this, even though we have contractors. So capacity has always been an issue for us. Economic Development Lethbridge came along with this plan while we were scrambling to try to figure out what to do. And they asked, do you want in? As you no doubt know, and as we've talked about a lot, the city of Lethbridge needs the region. The economic base for the city of Lethbridge comes from the agricultural region that Southgrow represents. And our Southgrow communities need the city. It's the service center for our entire region. We've been successful in developing a very good collaborative relationship, and this is a furtherance of that. We regularly partner on initiatives, which I hope to be able to update you on at another time when I come to council. And money flows back and forth between the two organizations quite freely on the various initiatives. For instance, right now, Southgrow is serving as the money holder for about $100,000 labor market study that we're doing for all southwestern Alberta. That's an example of them giving us a lot of money. So we've got a good partnership, and this is a good way to leverage their capacity and experience in order to get the support our communities need at this time. So moving on to page 2 there, what the project is. Well, the goal of the task force is to get everybody back to work as quickly as possible, to hopefully help our businesses and individuals and employees bridge as far as they could across this crisis till we get back to something resembling normalcy. and then to help them reinitiate their own economic drivers as quickly as possible. The partnership includes Economic Development Lethbridge, South Crow, and the Chamber of Commerce here in town as the key funding partners. The board of directors of South Crow decided to match the money that Economic Development Lethbridge was putting in to make us an equal partner in this endeavor. And we are getting supporting partners from a host of other organizations who, some of them are putting in a bit of money and others are donating staff time in order to work in support of the initiative itself. Key principles on page 5 there. Basically, we've all been sitting at our desks watching information fly every which way, piles of it, disorganized as everyone scrambles to organize a response. And those of us who provide services at the economic development level try to make sense of it all. So we wanted to create a one-stop shop resource center and support center first and foremost for all of the businesses and individuals in the region. A place where we could funnel all of the information coming from the federal government and the provincial government and from AUMA and RMA all into one spot. So people would have one point of contact. And then also to put people behind a desk, manning the phones so that our business owners and individuals could actually reach out and have somebody help them directly. It's a bit beyond, myself or Greg or any of our other EDOs to really take that role on. And with the volunteers and individuals we've managed to get doing that, we've got people who are wading through the information of what is available on a daily basis. And so they are well equipped to help out the lowest common denominator who calls in with the problem. Like you and I understand that wading through government paperwork is hard for us. For your average person, even your average business owner, it's just a nightmare. And so there are people available on the other end of that phone call, that phone, who can help demystify the process for our people. Obviously, we wanted to also reduce duplication of efforts. So I've told all of my economic development officers in the South Crow region, you don't have to compile all this information. You don't have to go out and try to find it. We've created a one-stop shop for you. You can just link directly to it and leverage that and send people to our hotline. So it keeps them working on the things they need to work on for their communities and offloads a little bit of the responsibility. The priorities, number one, let's get online resources available and connected to our businesses and employees throughout the region. Number two, make sure that there's a place where people can get help getting the financial supports and help with those applications and help navigating the process. Number three, connect people into emotional supports, whether that's peer network or mental health services that are available. We've been finding that's an increasing priority. And then later on, once physical distancing is over, we're hoping to establish an actual physical support center that will be like a one-stop location. It will be based out of Lethbridge for a variety of reasons, which will occur to everybody who understands how these things work. But it actually will be a physical location where people can go and talk to somebody face to face in order to get help with the issues they are dealing with at that point, which we still don't know which those issues will be or what they will be getting help with at that point. But and then number five, workforce retention and development. Okay, as economic development officers, we've all taken courses on how do you do economic recovery in the face of a disaster. This is where we get to put those lessons and that training to work. That's something I will be working on more and more in the coming weeks as I get past the front end stuff and start to dialogue with people like Greg on, okay, what's our next steps? Once we're past the crisis, how do we respond to the crisis? How do we get those supports in place that get our businesses back open and get people back on their feet and get workers back in jobs? And then finally, identifying and address anything else holding businesses back. We've all been talking about how this crisis is going to fundamentally change our economic landscape, and it will. We're not too sure what that looks like yet, but we're going to have to respond in real time to a new reality and adjust our efforts as economic developers and as community leaders to that new reality. We will need to start doing things differently. We just don't know quite what that different looks like. So there's the 6 work streams that respond to those priorities. We've got people in charge of each one of the work streams. I'm in charge of priority number 5, the workforce retention and development page. I'm on page 7 there, just so you know. We've already got a skill gap study underway. That's the $100,000 project I told you about. We've actually paused that study with about half of the results that we were after already collected, because we're worried that we'd get to the other side of this crisis and all of our data would be worthless. So we are adapting our study in real time so that we've got a snapshot of what things were like before the crisis hit, and then hopefully we'll have some really relevant data on the backside, on the after the crisis, on what things look like. And that's going to inform the development of retraining programs and curriculum development to places like the college as well for the region. On page 8 there, so the Economic Developers of Alberta, which is a professional association that both Greg and I are part of, sent out a big survey a couple of weeks ago now. And they got 1,000 responses from businesses across the province. It's a mark of how fast this is all developing, that this data it's out of date at this point, although the conclusions are still relevant and interesting. The immediate business needs about 2 weeks ago were understanding what is available out there as far as supports and grants, so that they can keep their cash flow and operating expenses covered throughout this undefinable period of 2, 3, 4 months in which their cash flow has disappeared to next to zero. So that really informed our initial efforts on the kind of response we needed to put in place in order to help our people to the other side. Get them the information they need, get them to access to programs, help them bridge the gap. On page 9 there, this was a measure, I believe, about how long businesses thought they could survive without cash flow. You'll see that only 7% of the businesses there thought that they could get by for 6 months without any cash flow. That's actually fairly impressive if 7% could do that themselves there. And an awful lot of businesses won't be able to keep their doors open, won't be able to stay in business for very long, as you can see. So what do we do? You've heard about the $2 billion stimulus package that Premier Kenney's putting in place. That is a collection of infrastructure projects that were already on the list as far as getting things built. Go back to the New Deal program in the United States, and we've known for many decades now that when things get really, really bad, you dump money into public works, you get construction workers back out there doing their jobs, and money gets circulated in the economy, and that's good for everybody. So that was an immediate stimulus package that's already been announced. Now we know that that doesn't get us to our $73,410,000 for the region that would really count as an economic stimulus package. So there is more investment coming. I know that your council was asked by your local MLAs to submit shovel-ready projects, and I hope you've been able to do that along with the rest of the communities. I'm hoping some of those projects will be announced on an additional stimulus package that gets announced in the next few weeks. As far as the regional priorities go, if I jump down a couple of slides here to slide number 13, we've been encouraging the province to invest in core infrastructure in southern Alberta that we've been waving the flag on for a long time. Number one for us is fiber and broadband. Raymond's really lucky in that you have that fiber backbone for your community. If you are looking at extending your fiber backbone to cover other areas of the community, I would suggest, and I give the same message to every community I talk to, there's no better time like the present to do it if you can afford the hit to your pocketbook. This is not the time to tighten purse strings down as hard as they can go. If you have projects that you think will enable economic activity on the backside of this, make doing business in the town of Raymond more attractive, and you can afford to do it even through this crisis, I would encourage you to move ahead with those plans, to not put them on hold. Coaldale, for instance, has taken this message to heart. They had about $50 million of capital expenditure slated to happen over the next year or two moving ahead. They've decided to go ahead with that expense, even though they're taking a massive hit to their pocket. Now, every community is different. Some communities are able to actually do that, some can't. That's up for you guys to decide. But yeah, Raymond's in a good position from what I understand as far as the fundamentals of your community go. You're a bedroom community. you have a small portion of your taxes that comes from the business sector. And so therefore, this hit is going to be a little bit easier for you to endure and get to the other side of. But I'm sure you'll have your challenges, and you've already been staring down the barrel of those challenges too. As far as the regional priorities that we've been talking to the government of Alberta about, fiber, broadband, obviously. The problem there is that none of these projects, with the exception of the city of Lethbridge, are actually shovel ready. Those of our towns that have good broadband already have it. Those who don't have shovel ready projects. And it's not a good time to ask the government to invest in something that isn't ready to go, because there's plenty of things that are ready to go. Core infrastructure, of course, investing in the roads, rail, terminals, those kind of things that are ready to go. Highway 3, I have strong hopes that we're actually going to have an announcement about twinning for a section of Highway 3 that would directly speak to our core economic base throughout the center of the region. So we're probably talking twinning beyond Tabor up towards Burdett, Bow Island, that sort of thing. That would be timely, particularly with the hits that the potato industry is taking. And it would take about 4 years to get that section twinned anyways under the best possible circumstances, but it would put a lot of people back to work right now because that section is ready to go. And they could divide it up too to have multiple crews working on multiple sections. So that's a good thing. And of course, regional catalytic projects as well. These are things that the South Grow Board has signed on to, even though they are somewhat Lethbridge centric in their outlook, Lethbridge being the hub. The regional airport is ready for investment to move forward. They have shovel-ready projects that are good to go ahead. And they've got quite a bit of interest on the commercial side as far as developing the place as an additional industrial park on the outskirts of Lethbridge there. That would bring a lot of business into the region that would serve the wider agricultural sector quite a bit. Exhibition Park. So we've been working in the past year on mapping the agri-food cluster we have here in southern Alberta and finding out what we have and what we don't. One of the things we don't have is a world-class exhibition and conference facility. If you've been to Exhibition Park, you know what I'm talking about. It's old, it's falling apart. So when we think about bringing things like the Cattle Feeders Association of Canada down to southern Alberta for a conference, and we could get them once, maybe, they might not come back because people like to go where there's glamour and glitz, and they feel like they're in a world-class facility, et cetera, et cetera. We lose out to another community like Medicine Hat that does have new exhibition space, that sort of thing. And these investments are ready to go. Ideas for yourself. You've been privy to the AUMA's emails and the RMA's emails and advice coming from the province about municipalities can do to support their own communities and businesses. These next two slides here are just a list of some of the ideas that might help and that might be within your scope of actually being able to do. You'll see that pretty much all of it is just a deferral of payments or zero interest loans, that sort of thing. You don't really want to lose out on the revenue long term, but if you know it's coming in and it's just a deferral, you might be able to swing that. You know your books, I don't. So take this as advice. And the last thing with regards to these two slides there is Cameron Mills, the Economic Development Officer from Coaldale. He's volunteering on this task force to collect information from all the South Grow communities on what their municipalities are doing. And that information is going to be compiled and shared out to everybody. So you'll be able to look at what's happening in another community and think, oh, that's a good idea. Or you see something you don't recognize, you can pick up the phone, you can call that community and say, what's this all about? How's it working? Do your people appreciate it? Do you have uptake on it? And hopefully it will be a good venue for sharing best practice information as we all learn about this together. Last couple things I'll say here before I take off. Slide 17 there, how you can help. Yeah, leverage the work we're doing. You know, I work for you. I'm working on this almost full time at this point. So please go ahead and leverage the work that South Grow is doing for you, at least for those higher level engagement pieces and the resources. The hotline is probably the best resource we have in place right now. Let's take advantage of it. Find a way to advertise that to your community, that this is a phone number they can call and get the help they need. So your staff don't have to do all the heavy lifting, and your staff can work on, okay, what comes next, and start planning for the future. Look at ways how you can maintain or expand your funding for local infrastructure projects. Get people at working in your town. Get construction crews who are actually allowed to working in your town if you can do it. And find ways for maybe some local mom and pop shops to be able to cater to them or provide services in a way that doesn't violate the restrictions on business and what business can do. Get some cash flow going while you build infrastructure, which enables further growth in the future. For council and staff, study the lessons learned from High River, Fort McMurray, and Calgary in recent years. We are fortunate that we've got small scale models of what worked and what didn't to look at. And there's a lot of writing and material available out there. I can help you access some of it, and a lot of it is easily available online as well. There's been books written too. And then finally, don't neglect planning for the recovery period while the emergency is unfolding. And Greg has taken those disaster recovery courses. I think a few other people from Raymond have too. I know I've dusted off my textbook almost immediately and started rereading it because it's valuable. And the economic developers of Alberta are hosting weekly free webinars, and they've made a lot of resources either free or extremely cheap for every community in the province. You can get the textbook on economic disaster and resiliency for $30 off their website, and it's eye-opening. So that is my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions I might have. I like talking about what I do. You all know this, so.
Get back at it. Just some questions I had. You said their MLA had talked to us, but he hasn't talked to us. I guess, or CAO. What shovel ready projects did you tell him about, Curtis? Or did you have any?
I haven't spoken with Grant Hunter. I've spoken with MP Motts about this, but we do have numerous shovel-ready capital construction projects in all of the related fields. So if and when an opportunity arises for us to take advantage of it, we'll definitely be able to do so.
If I could offer a piece of advice, at this time, the best way to get those things on a priority list is to make as much noise as possible. Because they are grabbing things that are being handed to them as fast as they can left and right, and they will take what's at hand and throw money at it. So as squeaky as you can be, as fast as you can be, is the best policy.
Well, 845 is something we've been real squeaky about. Maybe we should be contacting them on that one.
Yeah, I've had discussions with them on that. That's not shovel ready, so that'll be next year. But we do have projects that we have everything ready for this year related to infrastructure in town. So I will definitely call our MLA and be squeaky.
Peter, what is the hotline number? Is that the 587-800-3356? Is that the hotline?
Yes, it is. So you can go to southgrow.com/recovery. There's a big banner on the top of our homepage that links to the recovery webpage we put up. Economic Development Lethbridge also has a recovery website. Theirs has a library of information, a ton of information. So if you want to do a deep dive into everything, go to Economic Development Lethbridge. I put up this site because I felt there was a need for something as simple as possible to funnel people to the available supports.
Well, we should be getting that information to all our small businesses.
Joan, I send daily emails to the chamber and our businesses. Yeah.
So do they have that hotline
They
number?
do.
Right?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Peter? If not, we really appreciate you doing this, Peter, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again.
That's a pleasure. Once this is all over, I'll try to come back to council again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 3.2. This is discussing the Bill 2 and the alcohol restricted covenants. All of you, I'm sure, have had an opportunity to read through this. We've had it for a couple of weeks, and then just lately we've had it. So I thought maybe the best way was to go over Curtis's, what he wrote in that 01-2020 IBD, a legal brief on Bill 2, the alcohol restricted covenants. So let's start there, and we'll try to have a good discussion on this. Everybody okay with that? Everybody okay with what I'm saying, where we're going?
Sounds good?
Okay, so you see
I'm good.
Curtis wrote this. Let's go to the background first. You can all read, I don't need to read it to you. Just read the background.
Mayor,
Yes,
just for clarification, a couple of questions that I'd like to have answered. How many restricted covenants exist in the town of Raymond? Is there only one?
With what respect, Council Price? Specifically related to these type of articles?
It refers to numbers. You know, so if there are challenges and that kind of thing, are all of our community parcels under the same restrictive covenant? There's not two or three that say the same thing.
No, there's at least 3 separate restrictive covenants that are 3 separate instrument numbers that all 3 of them say relatively the exact same thing. However, if whichever property was to challenge it, only those that have the same instrument number that property does that's challenging it has the right to participate.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to clarify, that there are more than one. There
There's
are
at least
actually
3.
three.
We don't know, there may be more, but there's at least 3.
There's at least 3. Okay, thank you very much. That's what I needed.
I just have one more question too. When it says the town of Raymond, does that cover what we have brought into the town? For instance, the other areas that we've brought in because now they're part of the town of Raymond, or is there actually a map? I was confused about that.
do you have the answer, Curtis?
I don't have a map of every property in town that has that restrictive covenant on it. But the town of Raymond's boundary now is smaller than what it was before when the restrictive covenants were put on it initially. And so there's a high likelihood that properties outside of the town of Raymond actually have this restrictive covenant on it as well. It just depends on where that property is located and if for some reason it has been able to be removed by some chance over time.
From what I understand, these restricted covenants are on even all the properties all the way to Wilson Siding, from almost to New Dayton and all the way to Spring Coulee. So it's not just in the town. So they must have.
Okay, that answers the question.
They must
I
have
didn't
different
know if
numbers.
it would even apply to the parcels of land that were annexed into the town. But you're saying that it covers a pretty big area.
So as we get into this, we can ask more questions on this, but so we had our legal firm, and we'll just call them that, a legal firm. We had them go into this and look into Bill 2 and into the restricted covenants, and that's what we're going to discuss tonight. So Bill 2 and its impact on the town. This is a pretty interesting part. You can read that first paragraph. So from that, I guess we have the option of choosing or designating a picnic area in a public park where they can have alcohol. Right now, we do not have that. We don't even have a lot of picnic areas in this town. So this is something we can come back to and talk again. yet tonight, but I mean, just look at it now. Any questions on any of this? Councillor Foss?
Yeah, can you, maybe Curtis knows to clarify this, if we don't designate a picnic area, does that imply that alcohol consumption is not allowed in those parks, or do we need to actually make a policy to say whether or not we allow it in certain areas?
No, if you do not designate a park that is able to have the consumption of alcohol, there is no need for a policy because you have in effect deemed it as ineligible.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll come back to this. Any other questions from anybody? If not, we'll come back to this.
So basically, Curtis, if we don't do anything about this part, then the consumption of alcohol is not available. It can't.
Yeah,
There's no consumption in any parks. If we don't do anything, then there's not even a question. There's no consumption of alcohol in any of our parks, right?
correct. All Bill 2 did was remove the requirement to have food and remove the requirement for council, the AGLC, to put it to a vote. That's been taken out of the act because it's duplication. There's a legislative opportunity for people to have things brought through a petition through the Municipal Government Act. And so in light of not having duplication of legislation, they removed that from the Alberta, or the Liquor and Gaming and Cannabis Act. And so really all this does is that it gives you the option, which you had before, to choose if you'd like to designate a picnic area in a public park where consumption can occur, provided that you post a sign that states that you can consume in that location, the location of that designated area, and the hours in which alcohol may be consumed. If you choose to do that, that's what you must do. If you choose not to do anything, Bill 2 doesn't change anything.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on to if a request to sell alcohol is on a parcel that does not have the restricted covenant. Now this is interesting. It's from our legal firm, it's a little bit different the way we were told from our MLA, but it's still pretty close. So we have 90 days if someone wants a liquor license, and if we do not approve it, we just don't get back to them, and that is not granted, and then they have 3 years to apply. Everybody understand
Wait
that?
3 years.
What's that? Councillor Price?
They have to wait 3 years to apply again, basically. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just to add a question to here while we're thinking about this, how many parcels in town do not have a restricted covenant?
I don't have the answer to that, but I know there are more than a few.
Yeah, that would be my first question.
Yeah.
Because
and what
until
are
we
the-
actually know what that is, we don't even know what we're talking about. We don't know if we're talking about a couple of little pieces, or we don't know if we're talking about a couple of square blocks. Like, we just don't know,
Where
right?
are they located? All of those things
Yeah.
are important.
Yeah, that's,
Mayor?
it's hard to know if we don't know what area we're talking about, right?
So from what I understand, just on communication with the legal firm, the law firm, that there's not that many, and there are specific lots that don't have it, but I think most of them have the restricted covenant on them. There's not that many, but like, I'm not sure either.
Mayor,
Yes.
one thing that I would add that I took from this document is that the restrictive covenant is sort of independent of our licensing. So if somebody comes and applies for a license, there's no onus on the town to verify whether or not they have a restrictive covenant.
Correct.
That's they're bound by that covenant and restricted by it, but we're not bound by their covenant. And so I think it is an interesting question to say how many properties have this, but when it comes to us deciding whether or not we would allow a license to proceed, we don't have to know whether or not they're restricted in order to grant or deny a license.
That's interesting. Any
So,
other-
for instance, if somebody in the downtown area were to apply to open a liquor store, regardless of whether they're part of the restrictive covenant or not, we could grant that to them? Is that what you're saying, Councillor Foss?
That's my understanding, is that we have no legal obligation to verify whether or not they're restricted. But there is obviously a risk for anyone who does that. They're violating a restrictive covenant. Anyone else, at least my understanding of this document, anyone else who is on that same restrictive covenant could then raise an issue, take them to court or whatever. I don't know exactly what the instrument is that they use, but it would be those other property owners who are also on that restrictive covenant that could raise concerns about somebody doing that.
So
And that might be us. Maybe we are a property owner on the same covenant. I don't know.
So if somebody were to apply to open up an establishment of some kind and sell alcohol, the application would come to the town for a business license or to be located as a development permit within our commercial district. We would basically assess it as we would any other application. It would be up to the individual in either case, whether it's on a restrictive covenant titled property or not, it would be up to the individual to submit an application to the AGLC, and if they're able to get a permit, they submit the application to the AGLC, they let the town of Raymond know. If the town of Raymond decided, yes, we will allow that to happen, then the person has the choice of either going and operating until somebody with the same instrument number on their title as the property that they own challenges it through the courts, or they can take the opportunity to be proactive and try and approach all of the properties with that and have it removed. That's kind of how that would work. If the town decided, no, we aren't going to allow it and provide that license, we're either physically going to say no, or we're just going to ignore it for the 90 days, then that individual cannot proceed. They have to wait for the end of that 3-year period before they're able to apply again.
And my understanding is that anybody would have to wait. That 3-year period is the Liquor Control Board will not hear another application.
Correct.
For 3 years.
Correct.
So it sounds like the town is still really pretty much in control, right?
It is, unless there is, well, yes, it is. When the town decides to give up control on that, then you are forever saying no. You will not have the ability to regulate that going forward. The only way you can regulate it in the future, once you have given approval, is through land use controls, such as what we've done with retail and production of cannabis, where so many meters from a school or a park or playground in a commercially or industrially zoned district, you can regulate how many. But once you've given that initial approval, you have lost the right to deny any future approval on the grounds of that license.
So if we give up control, it's kind of like opens a whole can of worms.
It's open season, yes. You're right.
Well, not necessarily, because you would then develop a bylaw similar to the cannabis bylaw that we have that basically says within so many feet of these landmarks in these zoned areas, you can or cannot have something. So open season, I don't know if is an accurate term. It would just mean that somebody would be given the opportunity to open up an establishment if they chose. And provided that there wasn't a saturation where that concentration has been exceeded, then yes, another applicant could move forward as well. But you have to give that initial consent.
And I suspect that our land use bylaw doesn't even allow this type of establishment as a discretionary use or any type of use.
Correct.
I doubt we even address it. I haven't been through it with a fine tooth comb, but I doubt it's
prohibited.
even in there.
Stuart, it's prohibited right now.
So the land use bylaw would have to be changed.
Yeah.
Before it.
But that again, that's your opportunity to designate what Curtis is mentioning with distances, where, location, so
I missed that part, sorry.
You have most municipalities have very tight standards on congestion of liquor places, liquor stores particularly. Some more than others, but that's your opportunity to revisit that. And I think if you're going to allow anything, you make sure that you actually, I think you implement that first if you're ever going to make a change.
Yeah,
That
sure.
way you're ready.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions on that part? So the third paragraph, it says Bill 2, it talks about a referendum. If you go back into the legal document, the person that wrote it, the law firm, they talk about that we probably should have a plebiscite about it. And that either puts it to bed or it opens it up. So that's what they suggested. So that's something we can come back to yet tonight to talk about that. Any comments on that?
What page are you on there?
I'm on 01-2020 IBD, the legal brief, just in front of that parallel. And I'm on request to sell alcohol on a parcel that does not have a restricted covenant.
Okay.
It says Bill 2. So any questions from anybody on the plebiscite part?
Just a comment, if we do not bring this, I think at some point to a plebiscite, is going to be an ongoing thorn in our side. At some point, we probably do need to do a plebiscite, get a determination in general, and I think that will then guide us a little bit better in the decisions that we might have to make.
True. And we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that again at the end. Go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Well, I was just gonna second what Ralph is saying, Councillor Price is saying, that I think that would give us an opportunity to, well, either, hear from the community and approve it and it goes away, or give us some basis to say deny for a set amount of time. I think it's important for us as a council to sort of decide what that process looks like, and I think. And my preference would be that we do the plebiscite and that we schedule it, for the next election. I think, which is what kind of the document suggests. That way we kind of know what this is going to look like over the next year or two.
Yeah, council can choose to have a question on the next election. It's a non-binding in that sense, where it's just taken as information. If a group on either side of the argument or the position were to get a sufficient petition through the MGA, through the sections that are referenced, it then becomes a binding vote. So whatever the simple majority, 50% plus one, whatever that decision is, council doesn't have the ability to go against that. It is whatever that says. If you council wants to have the ability to gain public feedback but still retain the right to make that decision, then going ahead preemptively with a question is in your best interest.
So if we put that on the next election, then it's not binding. That was my concern.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand. Okay.
And I think that is the way we need to go, because we could have a very close vote. And if the very close vote was, 51 to 49, losing our ability because it went through the formal guidelines of the MGA, could ultimately put more pressure on us than having an open vote that at least says, okay, we at least know where we're leaning and what the issues are. It gives us better opportunity to make decisions around it, I think. So an open vote to me is the more appropriate way to go.
Okay,
Mayor,
yes. Councillor Pro.
this is I guess for Curtis. Is there a certain timeline where we'd have to publicize that this would be on a ballot? Is there that would allow either side to kind of rally around and gain some support, so they wouldn't go in blind? They'd have some information.
Yeah, there is some requirements, but we have plenty of time between now and then. So if you do decide to go down that path, through our future discussions, we'll make sure that that's to your knowledge, and we can make sure that either side of the argument has the ability to mobilize their support for or against the question.
Okay,
So I was gonna come
There.
back, to this later. But we're kind of talking about it now. I guess we could, in the future, we need to decide what we're gonna do about, when we're gonna do this, if we wanna do it sooner, or just, like Councillor Foss says, we just tell people we're gonna do it at the next election, so.
So, Curtis, I'm confused about the petition part. Are you saying the petition, they can petition for or against it, and that has an effect on whether the vote is binding or not? Is that what you're saying?
So
Based on that?
if council said no to a person's request for a liquor license, that person or a group of people who feel that was the wrong decision, if they can get, I believe it's 10% of the eligible voting public to sign with the proper information attached to that petition, they can then force council to have a vote on whether or not liquor license should be allowed in town. If it's a 50+1, then it's allowed, or if it's 50+1, then it's not, depending on the results there. You don't have the ability to change that. If you go ahead and make your decision proactively and have a question at an election, then it is not a binding referendum, it's just a plebiscite in which you're seeking public feedback and information, but you are still able to make the final decision.
So, yeah, what Councillor Foss said, that is the best way to go. I thought the petition was in conjunction with the question at the referendum, but it's not. It would be if somebody's aside from the election is actually applying at a different time, right? Okay, I got it.
So what did you say a sufficient petition was, Curtis?
There's a number of requirements, such as 10% of the voting public that have addresses that are checked in town. There's a clearly defined question that's written at the top of every page. They have to initial. It's not just what we've seen in the past where people put a list up at the Merc and everybody signs it, but they don't really know what they've signed. It's a bit more of a formal process. And if that were to happen and we're able to go through it and deem that it is eligible, then we are required to proceed with that, whatever the petition is for.
Everybody okay with that?
I don't.
Any other questions on that? Any other questions on this parcel do not have the restricted covenant? Okay, I'll move on to the next part. If requested to sell alcohol on a parcel that has a restricted covenant. So where we are, Ron, where we are on this? We're on Curtis's brief, his summary. Okay.
Mayor, I have a question on this one.
Okay, Councillor Foss?
And it's for Curtis. Do you know how many or which town-owned properties have a restrictive covenant on them?
I have not done a search for every town-owned property, so I cannot answer that now, no. But the majority of properties in town do have a restrictive covenant, depending on what instrument number it is. So it would be in the majority that would have it.
Okay. I suspect it would be in our interest to know specifically. I'm with you. I assume that most do, but I think it would be valuable for us to know which ones are restricted specifically.
Right now, I've just waited until an application comes in to pull the title in that sense to save money, and that's not doing it a blanket approach, just waiting to see if an application comes in for a specific parcel, and then we would pull it at that time. But no, I do not have a master list yet.
So just out of curiosity, would Victoria Park have a restricted covenant on it?
3 of the 4 titles do, 1 does not.
So this title, it says blocks B and E. Is that non-exhaustive?
No.
Okay.
That's for a specific property.
Okay.
So when Raymond was formed, the original plan 2039I was where the original restrictive covenant came into place. And any of the subsequent lots that still adhere to the original plan would still have that restrictive covenant. That's very clear. However, subsequently as time has progressed and things have been subdivided and chunked out and carved out, there's about 3 different plan numbers within the town borders of the town of Raymond. And so it's more the ones that are probably newer. And I think the VSB has been segmented a few times. And so that's where some of the new plans apply, and whether or not the restrictive covenant has been put in place on those is the question. At least that's been my experience.
So expropriated lands, they would not be in that original.
No.
We're not sure.
We're not sure. But 2039I, everyone that I've ever looked at has had it.
So just to dig deeper on this, earlier this year, the council did receive an application from the Ag Society to have a special event permit license on town property immediately adjacent to the grandstand. Council said yes. Upon further review of this, that parcel actually has the restrictive covenant on it, and through the legal follow-up, it says that if the town were to grant that going forward on that parcel, then it would be in violation of the restrictive covenant. However, the property immediately east of it, so about 100 feet from where they were wanting to have the beer gardens per se, if you pushed it over that 100 feet or 200 feet or whatever it is to the edge of that next parcel, they could put it there and there'd be no problem.
Interesting.
Megan. This is where I say there's value in us knowing on each of our parcels, because as requests like this come, I would love to just have sort of a policy that defines where this can happen and where this can't. My concern with the restrictive covenant is certainly or is mostly around unnecessary risk to the town when it comes to the legal costs or whatever it might come of it if somebody were to raise legal action based on an allowance to have a permitted event on it.
I have a question. I'm still trying to figure out the difference between the parcels that have restrictive covenants and the parcels that don't have it. Like what? It seems like it's pretty much the same. What's the
So
bottom line on those two?
over time, some parcels just have had it removed. We're not sure why or how, but some parcels were on what used to be road allowances or on Victoria Park itself, which was never deemed for necessarily housing developments per se. It was a green space on the original plan. So it wasn't necessarily allocated there. There have been some properties that just over years with land titles, the restrictive covenant has been removed and we're not sure why, but it's done. And there's really nothing that can be changed in that now. And so the only difference, Joan, you have to know is if a request comes in on a piece of property that has a restrictive covenant, there's still the obligation of the AGLC to give the town notice that an application's been received. The town has the ability to say yes or no within those 90 days. If it says yes, that's problem solved for that kind of a perspective. If they say no, then no further applications can wait for 3 years. Once you do decide to give that license, the person still has to deal with the restrictive covenant component of it. And so the restrictive covenant is either going to be that they just go ahead and wait for someone to provide legal challenge and let the court decide if the intent of the restrictive covenant is still there, or for them to proactively try and get it removed. And if they can't get unanimous consent, then it goes back to the courts.
So why would we ever entertain an application to have a beer garden, say from the Ag Society for anyone else? Wouldn't they just apply directly to the GLAC and then have them notify us?
If it's on their own property, yes. But if it's they're asking to have it on your property, then you have to make that determination.
Okay. So they still have to come to us for permission first and then apply for the license.
Yeah. Now, there's two different things. A special event permit license is different than these. We would just make sure that when an application comes in that we would check that specific title now that we have an understanding of how the restrictive covenants work, because I don't think we've really understood that up until this point. If it is on a property with a restrictive covenant on it, we can just say, no, I'm sorry, you can't have it there. But if they do come with a property that does not have the restrictive covenant on it, it's really outside of our control. And if they own that parcel, they can submit through that application to the AGLC, and if it's approved, they can proceed until it's challenged, or if they proactively try to get it removed. But all of these still have to fit within the framework of our land use bylaw. And right now, that would not be permitted in a residential area. It would have to be in a commercially or not industrially zoned parcel. And even within that, then, it's not necessarily permitted. And so there'd have to be some legislative things we'd have to do on our end. Because if we did say yes, but the land use bylaw prohibits it, that's going to add strength to an argument saying the town is no longer a drag community, but there's legislation that's preventing me from doing it. Therefore, I need a judge to decide.
Mayor?
Yes,
Not to raise another can of worms, but where does this put us with property to the west of our town hall? The new building that's going up there, the special events, I'm assuming it's a special events permit. If that's a restricted property with the restricted covenant on it, that puts them in violation, does it not? And by having granted that, does that put us in any kind of position where we have forgone our position as a dry town?
That property does not have the restrictive covenant on it.
Okay. The fact that we've authorized that, then.
We haven't authorized it. That went through the AGLC.
as a
Okay.
special
And
event license.
yeah, and it's not, that's right, it's not a formal license, it's just special events license, so therefore it's not something they had to deal with. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
So, I guess the bottom line that I'm trying to understand is, do we have more control when there is a restrictive license or not restrictive?
Are you talking with respect to special event licenses, or are you talking
No,
just
no,
with,
just for the,
Restricted
you know, I'm not talking about special events, I'm talking about just so far as somebody opening a store or you know, something.
there's
When do
a-
we have the most power?
there's
in
no
the ones
difference.
with restrictions or without the restrictions?
There's no difference until you grant a license.
Okay, that's what I understood, but I was just making sure that I understood it correctly. Thank you.
And I would just add that it's beyond the scope of our council to know whether or not they have a restriction on their title. That's a, you know, when they bought the property, they entered into that agreement by purchasing the property. And us granting it, I think that's an independent question. The question is for them whether they want to pursue removing the covenant or not.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion on that part? I think it does talk too that if they want to remove that restricted covenant, it takes unanimous consent, not just a majority consent too.
Well, only if you're trying to do it without legal recourse.
Okay.
I do think it's in our interest. You know, Curtis essentially described a process that I think should be captured in a policy of the town, which is that, you know, we may grant these licenses, but only on properties like properties we own, special event licenses, only in cases where, you know, we check the title and it's clear, there's no restriction. Where there is a restriction, I think we should capture in a policy that we don't allow special event licenses on town-owned properties with restrictive covenants.
I think it's important to realize that we never do grant licenses. We can only approve licenses or disapprove of licenses.
Sorry, what I mean is grant permission to hold an event that.
Okay.
has a license.
Okay. Anything else on that area? I'll move to the next area. The special event liquor licenses. Okay, this, so in the past, people have been able to go to the AGLC to get their liquor licenses, and they've been able to get a special event like a beer garden or a weekend alcohol license. And the same is still the same. They've still got to go to the AGLC to get that license. So as we read farther down, the question was put from Curtis to our law firm about the golf course. Now, so it says here the golf course does not have a restricted covenant on it?
Correct.
So I find that very unusual that all the other land around would have it, but the golf course wouldn't. Is it because it was on the coulee, or any idea why, or?
I have no idea. It's just not on the title.
So you see the two arguments about having the liquor sold at the golf course, having a special event license, even there, right? Everybody have the opportunity to read that?
There's kind of two premises. One, if the town itself is applying for a special event permit license on land that does not have a restrictive covenant, you are not in violation of the restrictive covenant. You may frustrate private citizens that would like to have the opportunity of making money, and you're in effect preventing them from doing it elsewhere, but you're not in contravention of the restrictive covenant.
And you're opening the door for them to be able to have it.
Potentially, but that's open to them right now anyway. And if the town itself is doing it, then it could be argued that the town is no longer a dry community. Now, I think the one distinction to understand here is that just because there's an argument, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a strong argument. And so that's where the judge someone would come and say either for or against, these are my reasonings. The judge is going to have to determine if those arguments are sufficient enough to demonstrate that the nature of the community, the nature of the restrictive covenant has changed to the point where it's no longer valid. And that's up for a judge to decide. So if the town were to either do it themselves or lease out the kitchen to a group that wanted to do it and have them apply for it, no different than any other property in town like the Ag Society, it's on our land, but they own the buildings and they're allowed to kind of do those types of things. It gives an argument, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a strong argument. And so there needs to be that understanding of how an argument is developed for the courts. So there's kind of those two premises there.
I have a question. So at one point, we talked about the Sugar City Corporation owning the golf course and that being a remedy or something. Is that applicable, Greg? Would that make a difference?
It doesn't make much of a difference in the sense that it is a private entity, but so they would be permitted to do that in that sense, but the town is the primary shareholder. So
Okay.
I don't really think it changes. It gives a little bit of separation, but it's up to a judge to decide if there's sufficient arguments for or against the position.
Okay, thanks.
So any other questions on this from anybody?
I do have another question. So we lease the spot of land that the Ag Society buildings are on, is that correct? That's leased to them?
Yes.
So, us as the property owners, I suspect, are bound by a restrictive covenant. I'm just wondering how that works. If we've leased it to them, I assume that if they were to, say, violate that restrictive covenant, that comes back to us.
The Ag Society does not have a restrictive covenant on their parcel.
Oh, they don't, okay. But let's say another property that we own was leased to somebody.
Senior center.
that had a restrictive covenant. Do we know how that looks?
If there's a private group that's leasing land that the town owns that has a restrictive covenant on it,
Yeah, I guess what I'm, well, I don't know, I'm thinking this, sorry, as I'm asking the question, I'm kind of thinking it through, but perhaps if we have a better awareness of where the restrictive covenants are, if we are to lease a property to somebody, likely we should build something into the lease that, identifies that restriction to them.
yeah, that could be done.
Most of
That's
those
big.
leases, Stuart, are 25-year plus leases, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them might be hard to open those up because there might be other requests if we're not careful.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of curious, like if we haven't, I don't imagine we really have any where this could bite us, but let's say we had one that we'd leased out and they decided to have an event and, they're not consulting with us, they have a lease, whatever. I guess I'm just a little concerned about the liability and the risk, but if we're aware of any leases going forward, I think it's in our interest to when we do a lease, include that in the lease language.
So for example, Stuart, maybe the community center, something like that? We don't know on that one, do we?
How about the senior?
Seniors is another one, yeah.
Senior center?
It's buildings that we own is what you're talking about?
Yeah, so we own the senior center, perhaps it has a restrictive covenant. They operate it, they lease it, somebody wants to do a wedding, so they get an event license, that technically is in violation of the restrictive covenant.
It is in violation, however, it is up to somebody that has that same instrument number to challenge.
Yeah,
Right.
I was
No
gonna
one
say,
goes through the effort of
it really
challenging it.
depends on somebody else challenging it to.
It's no harm, no
to be an issue.
So how do you find out that number? Would you have to inquire of them to find out what number's on there?
The individual would have to pull title for that property and then compare it with their title of property that they own to see if they're the same.
And any such rental of the property, they have to restrict that to invited guests only. That can't be for an event that's open to the public. So if somebody were to rent the senior center for a wedding and they wanted to serve liquor there, they can't open that up to the general public. It has to be their guests, limited to their invited guests. Which is another safety issue for the town and for our people, so.
And that's from the AGLC.
So I suspect the risk is low, but it is a risk. I just think we should make sure that's in the language of the leases so that the risk is offloaded perhaps from us to the person leasing it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be expensive for us to pull the title to the properties that we own that would be eligible for something like that to see if the restrictive covenant is on it or not. It's just when we get into every parcel in town, that's where I think perhaps waiting until an application for that specific parcel might be prudent.
I totally agree. I would only suggest, town-owned properties, and when, if a lease gets opened or if an event license is applied for, that's the point where we would pull a title.
Does the AGLC have the responsibility to know that?
No.
So they don't have to let us know that it's on a restricted covenant area or anything else?
That has absolutely nothing to do with the AGLC.
They don't care whether it's restricted or not. They still have to let us know though that an application has been made.
Yeah, that's a local land use issue. That's not a AGLC issue.
Okay, any other discussion from anybody? So I think we have some, maybe some summary things that we can talk about just on this. Number one is how do we deal with the licensing? Well, I guess the licensing is gonna go through the AGLC, and then it'll come to us. So that's what we have to decide from there, what we're gonna do, if we're gonna grant it or not, so.
So I guess from this brief, there's really only two things that council can decide. One is, do you want to designate a place within town where the public can gather and consume alcohol provided it's not bought or sold? And two, do you want to have a question your next election on whether or not the public is for or against the sale of alcohol in the town of Raymond. Outside of those two issues, it really just depends on if and when an application comes from the AGLC. And then in that instance, you have the ability to decide, do you respond yes, or do you say no, or do you ignore it and let it be deferred for 3 years?
I think this exercise has, for me in particular, given me a significantly better understanding of the circumstances that we're in. I agree that there's not much that we can do other than educate ourselves a little bit better as to the circumstances in the community. And that's why I believe the question is necessary, be it the election day or whatever we do it. That question needs to be dealt with, and we need to get an idea of what the support or non-support is throughout the community and the percentages thereof. And we may still have somebody approach us with an application, or they may approach Alberta Liquor Control and ask for an application, which will come to us, and we need to be prepared. And I think we've got good information now that we can at least make a proper decision as to where we want to go. Worst case scenario, we do nothing. It freezes it for up to 3 years, but it also caught in the detail of the writing that we could actually change that within or before that 3-year period ended if we wanted to. That we could actually move forward and say, yeah, we're going to approve a license if we have to.
Correct.
Okay, so that's where I am. I think this has been a good exercise. I think we need to get the question answered, or the question done and answered, so we've got good solid material to work with, and we know what we're facing. We just have to deal with it as the opportunities and as these situations arise.
Councillor Harker?
One thing I think is that just having this exercise, like Councillor Price said, it's pretty confusing and pretty complicated. Most people in town think that because we let the Eagles come, that we just opened up the whole town to liquor. You know, they don't understand. The normal public in our town doesn't really understand this either. Do you know what I'm saying? They don't understand about the restrictive covenant, how it works. I'm wondering if we couldn't maybe put something out there so people understood this a little more readily.
There goes
Does
a whole
anybody
nother
else think that
newsletter.
that is the case?
They can always get on this now and watch this whole presentation.
Yeah. And then they can be as confused as we are.
Would there be any reason we wouldn't allow that legal memorandum to be distributed? Right now it's locked. Is there a reason we wouldn't just unlock it and let people see it?
No, that's up to your purview. Legal counsel, something that technically is something that's only for council, but if council deems it to be eligible to the public, then we can open it up. In the briefing document that I did, I basically surmised the gist of it, but there is other questions that I asked for them to get some context on that they gave further detail to. So there'd be no harm in that, provided council was willing to do that.
Yeah, I found it supremely educational, and I felt like I had a decent grasp on this, but there was a lot of the nuances that I hadn't picked up on that I found it very, very educational for me. And my feeling is that there's nothing in there that couldn't just be put out there. But if the rest of council feels like there's risk in putting it out, I'm fine with not putting it out. But I do think when it comes to putting the question to the public, I agree that we should. I would love for us to set a timeline for when that question will be put to the public. And then if we do get requests before we've put the question, that we would just indicate to those people that we're denying anything until we've put the question to the public. So if that's a 2-year timeline, we'd say we'll review this again after we've had our little plebiscite.
It's a 1.5 years.
I agree. I think that the education process for the public, some of that has to come from them, I would hesitate to put too much information out there that stimulated some of them to get on the bandwagon and proceed with things in advance of us being prepared to deal with it. And so I like Councillor Foss's idea of let's identify a date for the question. If it's election day, at least we've got that identified, and we can start to publicize that. As we get closer to election day, we can start putting out some of this information that will help people understand and maybe be able to make a better decision when it comes to responding to the question.
Good. So one other thing, Councillor Foss talked about having administration try to identify some of these properties. I think that'd be good if you could, Curtis. Look at some of the ones that are being used, and just so we can see if that restricted covenant's on them or not.
Does that literally mean pulling title at some expense?
So there's a minimum fee about $50 for pulling any single
I
title.
wouldn't want to see that happen, you know, for every title in town.
We didn't say for everyone, like he said, just the ones that are being used, like maybe the senior center.
The senior center,
Yeah,
community
for a
center.
select few that are
Yeah.
hotspots.
Just-
Okay.
Just ones we own too.
Yeah, we'll look at the ones that we know are gonna be of subject.
The community center.
But back to this original document, or not maybe an original document, way back when lots B and E were placed under restrictive covenant. Aren't there some seminal documents like that that'll tell us, or have even lots? Or
I'm
lots
sure there's a
being
way to do a
changed?
broader search, that's just beyond my capacity, but we can look into that. I don't really think it matters though, until an application comes in. When an application comes in, then we assess it on that parcel. If it has a restrictive covenant on it, the
That's
answer
a good
is
point too.
it's not permitted. If an application comes in and it's on a property that does not have the restrictive covenant, then that's a different discussion. But regardless, the applications go to the AGLC, and until you guys give consent, it's a moot point, it's a no. And so until that happens, again, there's really no point in even going that. Outside of perhaps looking at the properties that we own that could be used by leased out entities and have that, if it's on a property with restrictive covenant or not, I think there's value in us finding that, and that's not that many parcels. But outside of that, it really just depends on when and if council decides that liquor licenses are permitted in town, and until then, it's not really relevant.
Okay. Anything else from anybody on this? Okay, good discussion. Let's move on to 3.3, the council letter of recognition. You saw this letter that was drafted up by Curtis for Josh Daychief. I think he did a very good job on this. We need to recognize people like Josh for things like this, and Josh is very well and a recipient of this 2020 Rising Star Award. So. Any comments on this?
Total endorsement.
Just as a note, last week,
I was just gonna say.
Phyllis and Josh donated $5,000 to Salvation Army for COVID relief.
Wow.
And Streets Alive.
And Streets Alive.
And
And
the
he's actually delivered in town, I think I shouldn't say, but to some really needy people, some well-needed help.
We gave $50 gift cards.
Yeah, $150 gift cards to Streets Alive and Salvation Army. And he's also challenged all the businesses in Lethbridge to do the same. So, like I said, 5,000 isn't a lot, but if you get 20, do it. There's $100,000 donated.
Pretty amazing.
This is a good shout out
That
to
is very good.
Advanced Water.
Always good to see someone give back too, like that.
I think whenever we can recognize that too as a council, you know, give them
Yeah.
some, that we notice and that we appreciate their presence in our community, I think that's good.
Okay. We had two added items on our agenda, and one of them was the COVID-19 update. Curtis?
So, two things have come to our attention. Our Director of Emergency Management, Ken Steed, attended a teleconference today with some various provincial officials. There were some recommendations that came from that we wanted to bring to council for your attention and perhaps get some direction. The first is having the town actually issue a fire ban I spoke with our fire chief, Doug Holt, whose purview it actually is to issue fire bans. And I explained the rationale. The rationale behind the province's request is that bonfires and fires are typically social gatherings, and it's hard to limit congregations of people, especially when you're trying to ensure safe distances. And so our discussion was that if a fire ban were to be issued for the town of Raymond, we would qualify it so that it would only refer to properties that if you have it in your backyard and it's just your immediate family, there's no fire ban. But if it's outside of your backyard at a different location within town, such as Parrot Park, even if the gate was closed, or if you decided to have it in your backyard but you're inviting more than your immediate family over, then you would be in contravention of that fire ban. And so Chief Holt did agree with that premise, and so tomorrow we will be issuing that fire ban notice to residents of the community. You can still have a backyard wiener roast, provided you're less than 15 people, and those 15 people are your immediate family. But outside of that, it's not allowed until further notice. The second question that arose, and this is up to council's purview, was we're coming into yard sale and garage sale season. And the recommendation from the province is that there is absolutely no way that you can ensure that every piece of material that is at a yard sale has been sanitized, and the hand sanitization of the people who have come into the yard sale to look at all the items and control the spread if there was the ability for something to be passed on, that it's an absolute no. And so we're wanting to get council's direction on whether or not you are in favor of basically banning all garage sales or yard sales in the town of Raymond until further notice.
Okay,
I'm actually surprised the province hasn't added that to their list.
It may come, but it hasn't yet.
But it hasn't.
so discussion on those two items, anybody?
So I got a question.
Councillor Peters?
What about people that are still like selling things out of their homes, like Raymond Swap and Buy, where people are selling furniture or selling things? Is that still permissible, or is it under the onus of the potential buyers taking on that risk? How do we control all of that? What I'm trying to say.
So I think that would be a different argument. That's no different really than retail business having curbside pickup, or even just online online delivery. In that sense, it's still being shipped. I think that's separate from this. This is more of a come and rummage through all my stuff, and if you want to take anything, you can, versus this is a specific item that I'm specifically ordering, and then that person can use that. So I think there's a differentiation there. We don't have the ability to really enforce the latter anyway.
Sadly enough, I think some people are using that for some cash flow. I have a friend in Lethbridge that is pretty desperate for money, and she's selling stuff. So I don't know. It's hard to say that's a bad thing. I don't know. I can see the garage sale thing though.
Yeah, anything you can sell at your garage sale, you can do online if you'd like.
That's true. Do you want to, we can endorse this now, and then we can have a motion next week on the garage sale and the fire ban.
Well, the fire ban's not really your purview. That's up to Chief Holt to decide, and that's been decided. So we'll announce that tomorrow.
Mayor?
Sorry, Council Price.
Councillor Price?
I'm a little bit hesitant here on a couple of these things. The fire ban I have an understanding for. The garage sales, is that something that is being directed provincially, or is that something that we're talking about, or is it just through emergency services? I just fear that we are becoming significantly restricted as a people, and I worry where this is going if we continue to do some of this. I think it would be better to leave it in the hands of the higher levels to put the bans in place rather than us trying to jump on the bandwagon for some of these things personally.
I agree, Councillor Price.
So do I. I'd like to look at ways of keeping things going rather than restricting more. I mean, if it's just to look at how can we further restrict people, you know, that's not a great thing.
Now,
And then-
people are already, you know, revolting a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I get.
So who did it come
Mayor.
from, Curtis? Just, who did it come from, Curtis? Was
Just
it
through
from-
the Alberta Emergency Management conference call, not from Chief Medical Officer, as far as I know.
Okay, everybody understand that or hear that? Councillor Computers, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel the same as the other councillors, Councillor Price and Councillor Harker, in regard to the garage sale. I'd rather wait till it does come from Dr. Hinshaw or someone of that nature. When it comes to fire bans, I fully support it. You're going to probably see this across the province, especially those that get to camping season. If we haven't been lifted yet, the province will most likely have policies in place of no backcountry campfires. And I think part of that's going to be due to the situation this year of allocating funds that they normally have available for putting out fires and allocating those funds into healthcare and other areas. So the government's going to be very restrictive on lots of areas. I think if we can give our public a little leeway with garage sales, it might go a little ways of supporting.
Okay,
I like the idea of keeping things going and keeping things open instead of shutting everything down and totally restricting people. So as much as we can, I prefer that.
so we're hearing arguments from both sides. I guess our only, it just came from the emergency management is all.
It's just a recommendation.
A recommendation from them, if you wanna wait for it to come from the province, from Dr. Henshaw or from our premier, then I guess we can wait. I guess we're having more on the other side that wanna wait. Are you okay, Councillor Hagee?
I could go either way on this. I understand the response from the emergency management team. Because you can't really control garage sales. I've seen someone get 15, 20, 30 people out at a time. I don't know if you put any restrictions on where they have to supply gloves, plastic gloves to people if they come before they touch anything. I don't know how you would, control that. I don't think there is a way to control that. So I can go either way on this. I see both sides of it.
Okay,
You know, my experience right now, anywhere that I have to go, say a grocery store or anywhere else, people are wanting to stay away from each other anyway. I think people that go to garage sales will have a tendency to wait till somebody comes down that aisle before they go up it or whatever, you know. I think people will do, through the social distancing, they can do that at a garage sale too. And they don't have to touch every item, you know,
you can go home and wash your hands
Yeah.
after too.
and sterilize
I
it
think-
anyway.
I think people that are cautious just won't have a garage sale,
Yeah.
actually. I wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't personally have a garage sale, and I wouldn't go
No,
to a
me
garage sale,
neither.
but some
I
people.
And most people who have, family members, little kids, teenagers, they're not gonna want a garage sale right now.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Okay,
I just think it gives the people the opportunity to make the choices rather than it being dictated.
Give them
And
some
people
level
want
of
that
control.
right now. They wanna feel like they have some freedom.
Yeah, we need some say and some freedom.
Amen.
we might be dictated yet to us anyways.
Yeah, and if we are, then for sure, no garage
Okay.
sales.
Okay, we'll move on those items. The next one is a roundtable. I just wanted to make sure everybody, if you have anything you wanna bring up, you have a chance to do it. Councillor Computers, you have anything? Nothing? Councillor Harker?
Oh, I was just on a couple of interesting calls this week, people, we're in an interesting time, I mean, with the library board, the part-time workers are being let go so they can collect their $2,000 a month, which I guess that's neither here nor there, but I wanna say to people, somebody has to pay all that money back, right? I guess we're doing them a service, but we're doing the national debt a disservice. Also, I was on a board call with the Farm Safety Society, and one person was suggesting that we keep paying all the people that were working for farm safety with the farm safety reserves. Well, luckily that was nixed, because if the Farm Safety Society uses all its reserves to pay people who can't go into the schools and doing anything, then, that puts the farm safety in a very precarious position. So it's just interesting that all these things come out that you wouldn't even know were an issue. But yeah, so yes, we're in interesting times here. So those people who are very part-time are happy to let their part-time jobs go so that they can collect their $2,000 a month for 4 months or however long it is, right? So, but the reminder is that some taxpayer is going to have to pay back all that money. And I don't know if people are even figuring that out yet.
Okay,
So those are the 2 meetings that I was at.
okay, thank you. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, a couple of things. I appreciated South Grove thing. I've on my mind has been the TEDC committee and how we can help our local businesses come back from this. And so I think I'll likely try and call a TEDC meeting to get some heads together and maybe connect the dots with what South Grove's doing to our local business community. I know Greg, sounds like you're already doing a lot of that, which is great. The other thing, there was lots of chatter this week about golf courses. I saw that initially ours was announcing that they'd be open. The province came out pretty clearly and saying, no, they can't be open. I was curious about, with social distancing, we still have our trails and our trail system open, yet, a lot of our parks are closed, and I wondered if we can, say, sort of informally expand the trail system by allowing people to walk the trails within the golf course. Just as an option to allow people to space out more and still get out and walk. So that was one thing that was kind of on my mind. I don't know. I'm sure that Rich, or I know in the notice I saw on the thing they said no access at this point. And I'd be interested to know whether they've thought about using those trails to allow people to walk. Curtis, do you know?
So to answer the first part of your question, the walking trail along the green strip is still open. Playgrounds are closed, but the park and grass space around it is still open. Victoria Sports Park, the grass fields, the turf field, the grandstand structure, that's still all open to the public. Again, people just need to exercise proper social distancing. We have discussed it a little bit about allowing public access to the golf course. The challenge, though, is that we are still operating the golf course. We're still running, maintaining, and carrying out the normal day-to-day functions of that. And I mean, in the end, it is up to you to decide. Administratively, we would recommend against it. That's not the intent of the golf course, but that's something that you are able to definitely override if you felt it was required.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly either way, but I know lots of municipalities are trying to find ways to allow people to spread out more, and some largers are closing streets and allowing only bike and walking traffic. I think Vancouver, Stanley Park, they've closed it to all vehicle traffic. So anyway, just a thought. Like I said, I don't feel strongly either way, but it is. I suspect I've never been through the whole golf course. I suspect it's a lot of paved trail that might help people spread out, and maybe tease some people, encourage them to actually come golf and try it out sometime.
Yeah, there's arguments that you can make for or against, and it really is up to you. You just need to be understanding that the golf course, regardless of whether or not it's open, we still have staff there that are still mowing and maintaining and doing repair work on the infrastructure, and there is still a little bit of capital infrastructure that they're finishing. But perhaps that can be controlled. I think the challenge will be is that if it's open, technically people can't even use the direct practice range, and it's just controlling that. It's easier if we just say it's closed, versus having the public have free access and then still having to manage who's doing what on the course. It isn't impossible, but it's one less headache that the staff would have to carry, worry about if it was closed. But that can be overridden by you guys anytime.
Curtis, I tend to agree with you, because if I was gonna go out and walk the golf course, I'm gonna take a 9-iron with the ball and start hitting along the side. So I think it's too tempting. I think either you're gonna leave it all open, and then you manage it very challenging, or you just keep it closed. And I think everyone's gonna understand what's going on. Our paved trail, right now, the south side is getting used a whole bunch, and as the weather warms up, it'll probably be used more. So I still think there's still space for people to use and walk around town. Backyards are pretty good sized, and I think people will just understand that this year is so different from our regular year.
If Trudeau is wrong, and I hope he is, that this gets lifted sooner than later, but if he is right, then maybe we could be doing that in the future. I'm hoping he's wrong. In the future, we could be, maybe people want to be going and walking in other places. Okay, anything else, Councillor Foss?
There was something else, I forgot to make a note of it, so I don't, maybe at some point later I'll raise my hand and think of it, but right now that's it.
Okay, Councillor Price?
I have nothing beyond what we've discussed. I know that I think you have something on your agenda that I will provide some input for as we discuss your roundtable items. So other than that, I have nothing.
Okay, Councillor Higgy?
Yeah, this past week I got a couple phone calls and they asked me to bring this to council. If there's any appetite having some members of the Stampede Board be in on the discussions about canceling the rodeo July 1st or not canceling it. More or less, they just want us to hear their concerns about having it and their concerns about not having it.
So I also,
We'll still have the final decision, like we'll still make the decision, but maybe it might not hurt to have their input of why they, the concerns that they have.
so I've also had some discussions with people in the community on this too. Even the Rotarians doing the parade, maybe we need to have a little input from them. I mean, that's not a big budget item if things are opened up. If there's still a social distancing going on, we can't have a parade or a stampede. If things are opened up, maybe the Rotarians want to have a little bit of input into this. Do you know anything on that, Ralph, at all? Councillor Price?
Formally, we have not discussed the parade within Rotary at this time, but as an organization and having been responsible for the parade as long as we have, we're more than willing to do whatever is necessary. We'll be happy to stage an impromptu parade. We'll be happy to stage a more formal parade, whatever might be necessary for the public. We would hate to not have it happen, but at this point in time, I don't know that we have a way to make a decision or have an answer for it.
So the stampede, I can understand what they're talking about. If we cancel ours on May 1st and then the social distancing gets lifted and the other communities have their rodeos, then I think they would just like to be in on the conversation with us. To make sure that these other towns on July 1st aren't having their rodeos. If they're all canceled, then they're all canceled. I'm sure they agree with that.
Well, I can add a little more to that. All rodeos in Alberta have been canceled up until June 30th, as of now. So there won't be any rodeos till July 1st, and the reason they picked that date is because they're not ready to cancel Calgary Stampede yet.
So they have canceled all rodeos?
So they have canceled all the professional rodeos up till the end of June.
I know this would be complicated, but I suppose as we get closer, we can get into the discussion about whether we cancel or whether we postpone, but perhaps we consider moving some of these events further down in the year if things haven't cleared up by July.
That's interesting too.
I think the Stampede's biggest concern is financially, which, if we still have it and they only get half or a third of the contestants and only get 500,000 people coming to it instead of 3,000 people, it's, financially it's gonna hurt. So,
Well, that is your committee, you could reach out to the Stampede Board and just,
well, they've talked to me, a couple of them have called me, and that's why I brought it up tonight, just to see, if we'd be willing for them to just, kind of be in on the conversation and let us know what their concerns are. They don't want to be involved in the decision, that's still our decision, but maybe it might not hurt to hear from them what their concerns are.
I think you can talk to them and report back next week or the week after.
Okay.
In two committees. We'll know a lot in 2 weeks anyway.
So, and just to reiterate to council, the reason May 5th was chosen as the date was just to give you time to make whatever changes you may need to make in your 2020 operating budget with respect to mill rate.
Yeah.
If we are going to go ahead and include these projects with the downloaded costs that we receive from the province, there's a likelihood that there's a mill rate increase. And if you are wanting to not have to have that mill rate increase, then some of these experiences need to not be included, so that we can not incur the expense in our budget. So that's why the May 5th date is there. By no means are you held to that. If you say, no, we want to go, we can push it back. The further we push past in the budget, though, will cause us further cash flow issues as we push that date back. But it really is just a fundamental decision as to where you want the mill rate to go.
But the Heritage Days, the Stampede, that's not that big of a budget item.
Combined with it all, it's probably $40,000 to $60,000.
So you already have,
$45,000.
but a lot of those things will be dropped. You're talking the Stampede, you're talking the fireworks. The fireworks are already purchased,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
So we're not talking a big dollar amount.
Depends on what you do.
Depends on what we do.
Yep.
Correct. I think that's the whole part. As we get closer to July 1st, I guess we can decide what's happening, what isn't happening.
And the news about the other rodeos, they said as of now, they're canceled till the end of June. If this gets lifted in the next 3 to 4 weeks, those rodeos might be put back on. But as of now, they're prepared not to have any rodeos till July 1st, well, till the Calgary Stampede.
So I think you can be talking to the Stampede Board just to feel them out and see what they think and when their drop dead date would be on, when they would have to cancel it.
Okay.
I did talk to B Steed, and she does the road race, and she thought May 15th was about her date on that, on the road race. Okay, anything else, Councillor Hagee?
No, that's all.
Councillor Fromm?
A month ago, 75% of the work for Heritage Days was done, and people are scheduled and lined up and everything else, but the closer we get, the less chance we'll have people coming, to do games and displays and stuff like that too. So and there's a huge irony in the fact that Calgary's the hot spot for COVID deaths in Alberta.
Yeah.
And that's the rodeo that we're waiting on. I don't think the Calgary Stampede will go ahead on July 1st, personally, but I don't have a crystal ball as any bit of anybody else.
I agree with you. I don't think it'll go either.
Calgary's the worst spot in Alberta to be right now.
But there has been, because you have to understand the economical value that Stampede does every year.
Yeah,
It
but
brings
compare
in
that to
hundreds
March
of
Madness
millions.
and the basketball franchises and
It brings in hundreds
everything
of
else.
millions of dollars to that city every single year, so.
Yeah.
I think that's why they're hesitant to cancel that one.
So just for some context as well, on that phone call that Ken and Steve was on, they explained a little bit more about the numbers. The numbers you see in the news, that's not necessarily people in that community, it's where those people were tested. So the fact that Calgary is so high doesn't mean that they are all in Calgary. It means that the person was sick, happened to go to Calgary or was in Calgary, got tested, and that's where the number counted.
Yeah.
So there's a high likelihood that they have the largest concentration, yes. But when you do look at those numbers, just because it says MD of Tabor has X number, that doesn't necessarily mean that the MD of Tabor actually has those 3 people or however many it is. It meant that they were tested there.
Still, though, people in the world who have a tendency to come to the Stampede in Calgary, that's one of the major things. they're gonna be real reticent to fly into
Well,
town of Alberta.
The thing also is Air Canada, they announced that they canceled all international flights till the end of May. So you can't even go, you know, and Calgary, they rely a lot on people from the States coming. Well, people from all over the world coming. And not just people coming to watch, but people coming to participate. Like most are cowboys, you got guys from Wyoming, Colorado, Texas, Utah. You know, so that's, if they can't come across the border, that's gonna really hurt them, right?
Anyway, regardless, the Heritage Days could go ahead, I mean, on a moment's notice, it could really happen.
So we're talking way smaller scale than the Calgary Stampede.
Yeah.
We're just talking about giving our people something to do and being involved in Heritage Days. So,
And then these are professional rodeos they're talking about, you know, like Pinoca and places in Grand Prairie, places like that, is what they're talking about.
It's frustrating, we have to wait and see, we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, community futures Lethbridge, I mean, a lot of our businesses are just exactly the types of business that are suffering right now. I mean, we've not only suspended penalties and interest and stuff like that, but I mean, payments, I mean, we're not having people make any payments for their loans. There's so many small businesses that are hurting. We are still meeting though, we're using a Teams application instead of Zoom, and we are going to have our policy meeting on Thursday at 5. We've got some things, so if anybody has anything you want to have before the policy committee, let us know. Also, my business that I run is eligible for a 10% reduction in money we have to submit to the federal government for tax and the provincial government for tax. So there are lots of little businesses that might be eligible for that too, if you have people that are struggling to make payroll. You know, 10% for the months of April, May, and June. It's not a lot, but it's something that they can throw out there for not-for-profits and small businesses. I don't know if the town's eligible for any deferral of that. Nothing. Too bad.
Taxes.
None of the
These are
provisions
payroll
for
taxes that we do
deferral.
not have to, and it's not just a deferral. We get to submit 10% less.
We got a little bit of a discount in our dental premiums.
Oh, good.
But
No dentists.
for all intents and purposes, it's business as usual.
That's all. That's too bad. There should be something for
As far as I know.
municipalities.
As far as I know.
Hopefully something will be announced in the near future, but there are some programs out there. That's all from me.
okay, thank you.
Oh, except for the fact I'm getting tens of requests, you know, are you gonna have July 1st or not? You know, we're obviously not gonna cancel July 1st, but as part of the parade and stampede, people really wanna know that. I just wanna emphasize that too. I'm getting asked that a lot in town and public.
I am too. Okay, the only other thing you've covered everything I was gonna talk about, except for one thing, and that's the swimming pool. I've had a lot of people come to phone me and come to my door and even into my house and talk to me about the swimming pool. I know this is a tough one, but if things get lifted, if they don't get lifted, then everything is fine, but if they get lifted, it should be nice to have that pool open middle of July to in August. I know we have to plan for that, but is there any way, Curtis, we could have some kind of numbers presented to us? I mean, right now, it's, you'd like to have the drop dead date of May 5th no, it's not gonna happen, but what if things did get lifted and we could, people are paying good taxes in this town, I think they'd like to see some of their things be able to be used, like the pool. So I mean, just say if there was a July 15th opening.
Yeah, we can do whatever you'd like. Council just needs to understand that there'll be probably a mill rate increase that will correspond with it.
So the other thought, I talked to Councillor Price about this a little bit today, trying to understand it. But didn't we set aside like $350,000 that may help on not having to increase the taxes to try to cover some of these things?
We're finding some savings, but we still have that structural hole within our budget from last year that we used money that we were getting this year. That's one-time money that will be in 2021 that we're trying to use to cover that gap. So even with that, if the province hadn't given us increased policing expenses, reduced our MSI operating grant, and the other one that's escaping me, potentially we could have.
Policing.
Correct. we'd have to look at it, but when we looked at those numbers just a few weeks ago, it was include the pool, include Heritage Days, and include summer games, and increase taxes, or don't and don't. That was the scenario a few weeks ago.
I don't think anyone wants their taxes increased, especially this year.
Yep.
But if there's some way to make things work, I mean, we've, like you're saying, they're still talking about this policing requisition maybe not happening. It's still out there.
Well, we've been told regardless of whether or not, there's been no discussion provincially that it's not happening. The only thing that they've said is that you don't have to cash flow it this year, but you have to accrue it this year. So we still have to budget for it, which means we have to collect that amount, otherwise we're running a deficit, which we are not allowed to do. So unless the province changes that, we have to operate under the premise that it is there and it is an expense we are incurring. We have to have that decided by the time you pass your tax refund.
Yeah, it was on that one letter from Barry Morishito, the AUMA president, to the premier asking that not to happen because it's not gonna happen anyway. We're not getting the policing anyway. And they requested it to happen next year, that money, that first installment. So, I mean, we haven't heard back, but we're hoping that'll go through. I mean,
Mayor,
go ahead, Councilor Price.
just to chime in here, I did do some follow-up after you and I talked. And the actual number that we've set aside is 286, I believe. It is not 350.
Okay.
If you look at the final approved budget, that figure is in the 286 range, 285 range that we've set aside to assist on the operational side of things. That assistance will potentially end up being more for the cash flow needs that we're going to have. In looking at the whole process of things, we have another curve that's been thrown at us, and that is the golf course. We have a swimming pool, we have a golf course, both of which are closed. Both of which have set expenses and variable expenses that many are going to have to be incurred no matter what we do. As I looked at this, it became very apparent to me that our bigger concern is not our expenses, it's going to be our revenue. Because if we lose the golf course for the year, that's $220,000, $30,000, $50,000 of revenue that is going to go by the board, but we're still going to have to maintain the golf course. If we don't, we're going to have a cow pasture again, and that's not the purpose of what we've done with the golf course. So I still am very hesitant to try and look at ways that we can cut expenses and cut corners, because the circumstances are, we've done that. We've cut as many things as we can. What we're going to lose going forward now are the revenues associated with some of those projects that we had counted on up until now. And the budget we have set up includes those revenues. And so if we don't move forward in our budgeting this year with a balanced budget, and we attempt to go forward saying, well, let's not increase taxes, let's see where it will take us, and hopefully we can continue to reduce our cost, we're probably going to be in a bigger shortfall than if we went ahead with the tax increase, and if things work out and we get the benefit of using those facilities, we're already budgeted accordingly to do so. If we move forward and we do not get the benefit of using those facilities, we still have finances and money available to keep us out of a deeper deficit than potentially we would be in going the other route, in my opinion. So I think as an audit and finance committee, we probably need to somehow get together or Skype, whatever we need to do, and have some more detailed discussions with Martin and Curtis on this. But I'm just very concerned that if this continues, our bigger problem is not going to be expenses, it's going to be lost revenue. And lost revenue is going to hurt us quicker and harder than the fact that we have expenses to incur to maintain some of these properties.
Well said. I would just like to see some numbers come forward so we can just try to see, so we can have it in front of us anyway.
We can play with numbers forever, but think of it this way, Mayor. The pool. Right now, I think we're projecting a loss of $190,000 or something like that. Are we not, Curtis, if we did not have the pool open?
If we did not, or if we did?
If we did, that's basically what we have, right?
Yeah, if we open the pool, it's about that $190,000 loss.
Right, okay. And of course, that loss is net of the revenues.
Yes.
And so if you think about it, if we opened it for a portion of the year, which I would love to see us be able to do, any revenues we generate are merely going to offset costs that we've already budgeted for. It's not going to change the bottom line in any way, shape, or form to any significant degree. And that's the same with the golf course. The golf course will be worse because the revenues there are, of a greater level of benefit to the community than the revenues from the swimming pool. So it's, we can play with the numbers up on one, and we can give you different numbers, but the bottom line is, if we open the pool, we're going to have some revenues, but those revenues are going to be offset by the expenses that we have to budget to operate it. And so it doesn't matter when or if we open it. I don't think you're going to see any benefit to numbers more than we've got right now. I think the budget process has been severely beaten to death, and I think we've got the numbers where we need them to be. If we plan inappropriately, I think we're going to be hurt worse than if we move forward under the premise that we are going to have a normal year and we have a balanced budget to operate that normal year. Just my food for thought.
And just one other item of consideration, the deferral of the tax interest penalties this year cost us about $100,000 of revenue.
Yeah, we also have that cost to our revenues as well. We're losing revenue from our budget. We're not increasing expenses, and there's really not a lot of expenses we can cut back on. That's the way I'm seeing it, looking at the numbers again.
Which means the expenses have to be cut too, and that's why not opening the pool kind of solves a little bit of that problem. It would be nice to have it open, but it might be a moot point too, because the province has closed pools right now, and they might not let us open it anyway.
For sure.
We'll see what happens. Again, wait and see. What a frustrating statement. We have to do that again.
I just hate to have other people having, like Lethbridge or Sterling have their pools open and we don't have ours. And we could in the middle of July or August.
Yeah, we might be able to.
Okay.
If they were to open their pools, though, would it not be under the same premise we would be able to open ours?
Say that again?
If the restrictions are going to continue in place, nobody's going to be opening a pool.
And they're doing the same thing we are. I mean, they've got the revenues that are lost, but they've also got the expense of opening their pool. And if you lose one, you might as well lose the other.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just an optimist. I keep hoping it's going to be lifted and we'll be back to normal.
And if it's lifted and we're back to normal, that's great because we have a budget in place.
Yeah.
based on what we've done, that's balanced and capable of dealing with our needs for the year. And we have $285,000 that potentially we would have a decision that we could make in a positive manner to do some other capital project or something of value to add to the community.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, well, I guess that's it for council then. We appreciate all of you zooming in, and we'll adjourn this till next.
Mayor, I just wanted to pull this up on the screen. This is the site that Peter was mentioning for businesses. This actually covers off both personal needs as well as business needs. We've been feeding information to South Grow and to the economic development team in Lethbridge to get this up and running. So we're going to send out a little communication on our website. It's really hard to navigate information right now for people to find, especially for our businesses. This is the calls I'm getting by far and large. What applies to me? How can I navigate through it? Where can I find this support? So this site is specifically designed for that, but I wanted to share it with you tonight since I'm here anyways. This literally just came online here on Friday, so.
That's excellent, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, so we'll send that out, and again, I'm working very, very closely with, we have some very nervous business owners, and I'm not understating that enough. Like, there's a ton of businesses here that are worried about even paying their bills. I have one business owner, her OAS is paying the bills of her place right now.
Holy cow.
For OAS, so, you know, we have people that are definitely a bit nervous about it, so we're doing what we can. It's caused me to do a lot of extra skills, helping them out, but that's good, that's what I'm here for.
And there are
The
programs,
most
nice.
frustrating part is we're in a one-size-fits-all provincial mandate. I mean, you know, they're telling us what's essential, what's not, and south of Calgary, there's hardly even a case or there isn't a death. So, you know, I mean, it's pretty hard to rein all these businesses and make them feel like they're, you know, really doing their part when in reality it doesn't, you know, it seems to be very difficult.
It is, yeah. You're right, John.
So one more thing, did you happen to see the newsletter? I think they sent it to you. Councillor Hagee, Councillor Fromm, we have ours in front of us.
It's really
No.
nice.
Which newsletter?
I didn't send it to everybody, I just got a couple corrections as per Mr. Copeters, in terms of grammar. I'll send that out to everybody tonight. I've got to make just a couple minor changes and then that'll be going out in the mail this week.
I was
Looks
just gonna,
really nice.
I was just gonna add that in this time when everybody's got lots of time on their hands, maybe we could try to make Raymond more attractive by cleaning up our yards and around our neighborhoods. Be a great time to do it. If you go to the transfer station, it's really busy there. There's everything's been quite full. There's a lot of people going and doing it. So I mean, just a good reminder to everybody to clean up your yards. Anything else from anybody? Okay, I guess this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Yeah, everybody, have a good week.